Hi guys, Lindsay here with Storybook Family Farm. One of my favorite things about gardening is actually growing new things. Trying to grow things that get really huge, really tall, really big, really heavy. Just trying something new for fun, because it's also really exciting when you plant a small seed and it turns into, a big monstrosity like this one squash plant here. While I would love to take the credit for planting this seed that grew this massive, massive squash plant, there's no way that I could, because honestly, it's a volunteer. We had gotten a good deal last year on some fall mix squashes at the end of season, and our animals, like the goats, they absolutely love all things pumpkin. They clearly are, that white girl craze thing. Yeah, the pumpkin spice stuff, that's the goats. They absolutely love anything that's squash, anything that's pumpkin. And it's also really good for them too. It's a natural anti-wormer. But look at how big this freaking squash plant is. For those of you wondering, that big pile right up in there is about 2 cords of firewood that this squash plant has completely covered. And I'm about, over in here is about 15 feet from where I'm standing right now. That's where the squash plant starts. And it trails all the way over in here. It's taken up the entire walkway in between the duck and goose enclosure and the other garden there. It's gone over that way. I would guesstimate that this thing has spread to probably like 100 square feet of space for one squash plant. So this thing has had several squashes that we've seen on it. And last night, this is treacherous trying to walk through all of this without stepping on anything, because it's actively working on trying to get to the fence so it can climb up the fence too. But so we've been keeping an eye on some of the squashes that this plant has created, because they honestly were massive. Last night, for some crazy reason, after butchering 9 ducks and 3 roosters and doing the farmer's market yesterday, we decided it was a fantastic idea, when it was almost dark out, some alcohol may have been involved, to try to harvest some of the squashes. And let me show you what we got. This is the biggest squash that we've ever grown. We've never grown anything this heavy before. So here it is. Here is the smaller one right here. We weighed it before we filmed. And it weighed, let me show you guys here better. My hands are huge, and this thing is massive. This is a regular sized wheelbarrow, nothing really tiny. It's not a child size one or anything for scale. It's just a normal size wheelbarrow. The small squash weighed 33 pounds. It was actually broken off of the plant because it was hanging by the stem. So the stem had actually snapped off. So it was, obviously made to come out of there. The next one that we have here, this big mamma jamma here, that was actually wedged in between some of the logs. I had to reposition some of the logs back when the plant first started taking over the log pile. That one weighed 58 pounds. I had to stop and think for a second. This thing was so freaking hard to get out of here, because where it was growing at was actually clear back in there. So I had to basically go up and over and under. I basically played limbo with a squash plant last night to get in there, to get to it. And then Tracy had to go into the experimental garden here and, mosey her way through the big massive amount of sweet potatoes to then grab it from me over here without dropping it and without slipping in the manure pile. It was an adventure, to say the least. If it wasn't so dark out, we probably would have filmed it, but, hindsight's 2020, I suppose. But then the other thing that we grew, that we harvested yesterday, is one of these. This thing is about 3 feet long. It only weighs like 3.4 pounds. I figured while I was weighing the big heavy stuff outside, I should weigh this one here too. So this is something that we grew a couple years ago when we lived in town. It is called a snake gourd, or another name for it is a cucuzzi zucchini, I think is what it is, or cucuzzi squash, something like that. We grew it because it's really good in stir fries when you harvest them young, but the seeds are incredibly expensive. It's in the gourd family, so you don't have to worry about it cross-pollinating with the squash, which I also have one of them growing in the experimental garden, but it all just looks like this massive squash pumpkin plant thing, the leaves do. But so I had this one growing, this snake gourd actually growing in the regular garden, but the reason that I let it get so big is because we need seeds for it. When you go to buy seeds for these, they're usually like $3 for a pack, and it usually only has like 4 seeds, and they're known for not having very good germination. So basically, since the plant didn't produce very many Zucchinis or squashes, I don't really know if they'd be considered gourds, squashes, or zucchinis, because when you look at it online, there's like all these different terms for the same exact thing. So it's kind of complicated. But anyways, normally we would harvest them when they're about the size of a zucchini, or not a zucchini, like a cucumber, like 8 inches long, 6 inches long. And then they're, about that big around, and they make really nice additions to stir fries. They freeze well, and they're just really good. And if you deep fry them, like if you bread them and fry them like you do like zucchini and different things like that, it kind of has like a peanutty taste. It's really good. But so normally we would harvest them young, dice them up, and then put them in the freezer, so that way when we're making like teriyaki rabbit, we can then add them in as like a stir fry type thing, and it tastes really good. But this year, because the seeds being so expensive, they're very hard to find, I decided that since it didn't produce very much, I would just let this one harden off, and it'll keep actually through most of the winter time. Let it harden off so that way I can save the seeds for next year. So then instead of paying like almost $4 for 4 seeds that might not germinate, this way I have, 20 seeds, 30 seeds, something like that for the cost of 1 pack. So that's kind of my jam. I like to save money that way, but yeah, that's about it for today. My back is killing me actually from weighing those squashes. They are massive. They don't look that big on camera, but I'm telling you, these puppies, I have never grown anything this big. Prior to this year, the biggest ones we ever grew were the strawberry crown. That's what they were called. And the biggest one we had, I think, was like 11 pounds. So going from something being 11 pounds is the biggest thing you grew to something that is like 58 pounds, that's insane. And this puppy is loaded still. Like there's another one right down here that's growing, and it is, can't keep the squash leaves out of the way, but it is probably a little bit bigger than a basketball. And then there's several other small ones that are all over the place. So with harvesting the really big squash that we did last night and grabbing the other one, it should actually give the plant enough strength and energy to try to really crank out production of these squashes before we get our first frost, and that'll, ultimately kill it, and then ultimately unlock all of the wood pile for me to finish cutting. So anyways, that's it for today. I've got to take this wheelbarrow back over towards the house so that way I can keep it protected from the rain and from the pesky turkeys. So thanks for watching. Have a good one, guys.